Hi everyone, I'm Gary and I'd like to welcome you to this program. Today we are continuing with our series, Conversations with Remarkable Minds. Then we're going to segue into Sugar is the New Heroin, the latest on health and healing, the newest on resveratrol, how you can protect your arteries, and also why dietary supplements are under attack. I'll also be giving a response to Rabbi Michael Lerner, who was on earlier in this week, when he and I shared a different point of view on Barack Obama and those people around him, and even another guest, Dr. Professor Thurman, who also sides with Lerner that he believes that Obama is a very progressive individual, and I'm certainly hopeful of that. But one of the listeners and one of the people out there writing on commondreams.com, Jeff Cohen, has a little commentary, short commentary I think is of value. The mystique of free market guy Obama. We'll share that with you as well. I will be taking calls on our special 2-hour edition of our program today, and so let us begin. My guest is Professor Harvey Cox. He is the Hollis Professor of Harvard Divinity School. That's the oldest professorship at Harvard, going back to 1721. He has taught there since 1965, and just recently, just in the last few months, retired at age 80. Professor Cox has been called one of the most important liberal theologians during the last half-century and a leading trend spotter in American religion. He has also been a prominent civil rights and anti-war activist throughout his career. His book, The Secular City, written back in 1965, was a surprise bestseller and predicted much of what we are slowly unfolding in large segments of society where dogmatic religious beliefs are dropping and making room for secular values that are in concert with the higher spiritual values of religion. In fact, even back then, Professor Cox viewed this as a maturing of humanity and a divine gift rather than a spiritual threat. Professor Cox recently timed his retirement with a new publication which mirrors back to The Secular City. This book, The Future of Faith, The Rise and Fall of Beliefs in the Coming Age of Spirit, offers a new starting point to what has been happening in the past and where the current religious trends seem to be pointing in the future. Now, just a few thoughts, and we're going to go to this individual who is standing by. He has always been at the forefront of what is known as the interfaith movement, the dialogue between the faiths to agree on where they are similar rather than how they differ. And although being religious, he views spirituality, although he would distinguish this from its common New Age usage, as compatible with secularism. In fact, he strongly favors the collapse of dogma to make way for a spiritual culture that focuses on higher values of civil justice, environmental sensibility, right livelihood, kindness, compassion, and all of the similar things Rabbi Abraham Lerner lists earlier in this week. And I believe that the two know each other. One of the main things my guest has focused on throughout the decades has been observing trends in religion and commenting about what they might be leading to in the future. Now, let's go over and say hello to Professor Harvey Cox. Nice to have you with us today, sir.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
First, just a few overview questions. And in the context of this program, I like to give rather broad-based questions and then sit quietly so that you have a chance to really lay out in proper context your thoughts. As the UN has been meeting, and as we've heard from people around the world, there has been very little real spiritual thought of how nations and people can unify into common positive work. Instead, there has been, well, you did this, and therefore we're going to do that. You're in denial of this, so we're going to do that. A lot of this political one-upmanship, and that I feel is very counterproductive on everyone's part. If you were to give a talk today to every one of the world's leaders, what would you share with them that would give them a moment to pause, specifically on this issue, the Israeli-Arab conflict, the Palestinian conflict, the conflict in Afghanistan, the conflict in Pakistan, the conflict in Iraq? Let's begin with those.
Begin with those. Yeah, I can see why you give your people you interview a long time to respond, Gary. That's not something easily packageable. I think one of the things I'd want to say to the leaders is that the people are ahead of them. I really think the leaders now have to catch up with the changing popular sentiments among and between especially religiously and spiritually committed people who are moving into a whole new phase in which the traditional barriers between and among religions are now being viewed more and more as porous, and a lot of borrowing is going on. And we live in a time in which there's probably more intercommunication among the various religious groups and traditions than any time in the past. Now, admittedly, there are pockets here and there in which the interaction is negative, destructive, intense, but I think they get a lot of attention. They're noisy and destructive, but the sweeping seismic current around the world is something quite different. That's one of the things I discuss in my new book, The Future of Faith, is that it's what I call, some people have referred to as the collage mentality. What has often happened at the level of theologies, where one thinker, or a Jewish or Muslim or Christian thinker, borrowed categories or ideas from others, has now become more or less democratized. So you have the individual who maybe goes to church on Sunday morning, goes to his yoga class in the evening, comes back and picks up a book by Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama at his bedside table, or maybe reads some Rumi, and this utilization or this mining of the different religious traditions into one's own personal collage is a good word for it, I think, is happening on a very widespread scale. And it is, of course, often opposed by religious leaders who like to think that you have to take the whole package the way it's been wrapped and delivered for centuries, and rather lose control when there's a much more direct access to the sacred. Now, I think that's really one of the meanings of the phrase one hears a lot of times nowadays. Somebody will say, well, I'm not really a religious person, but I'm spiritual. I kept asking myself, what does that mean? Because I hear it all the time. And it means a lot of things, but one of the things it surely means is the unlinking of the quest for spiritual reality, for the sacred, from the institutional and doctrinal wrappings, with which and in which it's been brought to the current period. People want something much more direct, something much more accessible, and I think that's happening now. As far as these various conflicts around the world that you mentioned, these are the points at which you might say some people seem not to have gotten the word. Think about the Palestinian-Israeli situation, which every poll shows that both Palestinians and Israelis are ready to make a large range of compromises in order to have a peaceful solution, a two-state solution. They may differ on what the details will be, but what